that I really didn't even expect. And then I had to go back to the lab and figure out, why is this happening? This is a grow formula. I shouldn't be getting 20% more flowers. What's going on here? But never mind, I won't go into that. I could spend all day talking about my adventures in the lab over my career. Okay, next one, CalMag. All I'm going to say is CalMag is CalMag. I think on tape, I think it's overly prescribed. Everybody gets a little bit of a yellow leaf. Oh, should I add some CalMag? Calcium is a passive element. It's immobile. It's taken up in the transpiration stream. Every single hydroponic nutrient out there, when you're designing it as a chemical engineer, the very first thing you do is put the calcium in. That's the first ingredient. Say, I want 200 parts per million calcium. I'll put it as calcium nitrate. It's there. All the calcium the plant needs is already there. The question is it getting into the plant? Not just in the roots. Calcium gets locked up in soil very easily. It locks up with phosphates, and calcium phosphate. That's what your bones are made out of. It's 95% water insoluble. Calcium sulfate, that's gypsum. Plaster of Paris, 98% water insoluble. So calcium does get locked up. One of the best things you can do, the first thing is control your humidity. If your humidity gets too high, the plant's not transpiring as much water. So you start to get a calcium deficiency. It shows up in the new growth. If the temperatures go up too high as well, and it even makes it worse. Not getting enough transpiration. You'll get tip burn in lettuce. You get blossom end rot in tomatoes, and your flowers can deform, and the new growth can deform due to calcium deficiency. So the first thing is to get your humidity under control, because there's plenty of calcium there. Second thing is good air movement, especially in the summer. No stagnant air. You have stagnant air, when there's photosynthesis, water vapor is a byproduct. And it can actually make a vapor barrier on the bottom of the leaf so the plant can't take up CO2. And the plants can go into photorespiration. Also, if it's blocked up with that vapor, it's stagnant air, then it's not going to be taking up more water, you get a calcium deficiency. So those are your two main things. Air movement and humidity control. There's one more thing you can do for calcium, and that is use amino acids. This is a byproduct of microorganisms, and it'll do two things. So if any of you use CalMag products, okay. If you use a CalMag product, then for it to really work for your plants the best, to get those thicker stems, you're going to want to add amino acids with it. Amino acids are organic molecules that chelate the calcium. They keep it soluble. They attach to it those calcium ions like a claw, so it doesn't react with the phosphates. It doesn't react with the sulfates. It stays soluble, so it's available to the roots. And nature has developed this beautiful thing. Not only does it keep because this is made right on the roots by plant growth promoting rhizobacteria. They make digestive enzymes that change proteins into amino acids. But two of the amino acids in here, glutamic acid and glycine, literally stimulate root cells to open up calcium ion channels. So instead of one ion at a time going into the root and up into the plant, 1,000 calcium ions at a time go in. They get pulled up, they react with pectic acid, make pectin, calcium pectate. That's the glue that glues the cell walls together. The plants will become very resistant to powdery mildew. If they're grown all through veg with that, you'll get thicker stems than you've ever seen. They're going to build those strong cell walls. And if the vascular system is strengthened because of the extra calcium uptake, then the plant takes up water and all the other minerals more efficiently. And does more chemistry, higher bricks, more sugar content. As the organic gardeners know this, the really, really, really good ones, that if you can get the bricks, that's the sugar content in the sap, above 12%, sucking insects won't even recognize the plant as food. They won't even land on it. So if you can get that calcium uptake, so the more efficiently plants take up water and minerals, the higher the bricks. So it's one of the side effects of the calcium uptake. And this doesn't have calcium in it. It just helps the plant use the calcium. In In the Netherlands, it's against the law to use any fungicide on food crops. So back in 2000 they did it because all known fungicides had at least the potential for negative side effects on human beings. So overnight they were losing 40% of their crops. The gray mold, powdery mildew, especially the strawberry growers. You know how susceptible they are, right? To molds. Well, they started doing experiments with biostimulants from Germany. I got to interview the Dutch grower who did the test for the Dutch government. I saw the results before the Dutch government did. I interviewed him face to face on camera, just like we're doing today. He went from losing 40% of his crop to losing 0. He got a 10% increase in yield over any past year, not just that time, and he was first in the line for sugar content in the fruit, the highest bricks. And they wouldn't tell me what the secret was. How did it work? They said it was all organic, Eco-1, you know, non-toxic, it's not a fungicide. It took me 5 years to solve the mystery. This is the biggest part of that, the amino acid blend. When I went back to the Netherlands 5 years later and said, I've been experimenting with the 7 primary amino acid chelators, and told them about my experiments, they said, you know more about our product than we do. They started pumping me for information. And I said, is it the calcium? They went, it's the calcium. That's it. You gotta get it in the plant. Don't just add more CalMag, it just sits there in the reservoir.
It's the same in the body. You have to have, when your body takes calcium, you have to have whatever is a mineral or something that
A
helps.
vitamin, like vitamin D for us.
Otherwise your body just sits on calcium, doesn't do anything with it.
Yeah. And the same way with plants. It'll lock up in the soil, and it can, with other minerals, and become unavailable, or it's not taken up probably by the menstruation stream. But I don't have time to go into it a lot. I could do a whole class just on amino acids because one of the big things it did. Remember, I said it takes up calcium because 1,000 ions, or maybe even up to 1,000,000, literally ions at a time. I usually don't like to say that because it sounds it's not even possible, but that's actually true. When you open a calcium ion channel, it could be thousands to millions of ions instead of just one at a time. But it makes the calcium pectate. That's the glue that glues the cell walls together. When a mold spore lands on a leaf, it wants to germinate. It has to germinate. It exudes an enzyme in the germination tube that breaks down the pectin so it can get into the cell, get established in the water, and then spread. But if you have increased pectin because of the calcium pectate, then it's so hard for that germination tube to penetrate into get to the water that it dries up and dies before it has a chance to germinate. That's why they went from losing 40% of the crop to losing 0. It wasn't killing the fungus. The fungus couldn't get established. And it's a lot better to protect the plant against it than it is to try to fight it. Because once it's in there in the tissue, it's there and it's really hard to, it can spread pretty easily because it's systemic at that point. But they went to losing literally 0. There might have been powdery mildew in there in the greenhouse, but they had 0 loss because it couldn't spread. There might have been a few hot spots, but the plants were protected. And the key to that is amino acids. If anyone here used well water, hard water, first thing, that's loaded with calcium carbonate, magnesium carbonate. If you put this in the water first, you'll have no lime scale.
How much of that do you put in and to what proportion?
This one is 1/8 to 1/4 of a teaspoon per gallon. And I would just, in hydroponics, I would just do it only at the reservoir change, especially if you're using well water. When I was doing my experiments, I have very hard water. When I would add my pH lower for hydroponics, phosphoric acid, I could literally see crystals of calcium phosphate forming in the water and falling on a solution like snowflake sparkling in the water. But when I started using aminos, not this particular one, this was I think 9-10 years ago when I started experimenting with amino acids. But the first thing I noticed was no more lime scale. At the end of the summer, I took a paper towel, cleaned a little algae film off, rinsed it with a hose, it was clean. So where did all that calcium carbonate go, all that calcium go? And when you add the phosphoric acid, it burns the bicarbonates off as carbon dioxide and water, and then it reacts with the calcium and calcium phosphate. But it wasn't there. Where'd it go? Into the plant. And the quality, the bricks, I was testing bricks. This is even before I knew You know, that's when I was doing my experiments. They have low, medium, and high bricks for quality. My bricks was so far above premium quality that I would literally, statistically, have to create a new category for it, for the produce I was growing. And I was doing it on a very sensitive crop. I was trying to do a test on romaine lettuce outdoors, hydroponics, something very, I mean, this is a sensitive crop, right? I went through 3 hard frosts, didn't lose 1 leaf. That's how strong those plants were. And we were growing commercially too at that time with my wife. She had breast cancer, so she couldn't teach back then. So we did this as a little business. She had something to do pretty much. But every store and every restaurant that tasted that lettuce or saw it, bought it at 20% above premium price. Not one no. Every single one. And it was gourmet quality. You could taste the peppery, you could taste a little bit of the bitter, the sweet, all those other, the romaine lettuce is supposed to taste like. It was in there. So when that brix goes up, the plant's more nutrient dense, but it also increases its resistance to disease and improves the flavors as well. So again, that's one of those things in nature, it's done without our help, because the microbes on the root zone digest proteins into amino acids right on the surface of the root, and the plant responds and starts to take it up. Oh, by the way, too, if like I said, I just do a whole class on this. I better kind of wrap this part up. Calcium also activates the enzymes that pump the growth hormones to the plant. So the plant, one of the amino acids, there's some in here too, tryptophan, the plant takes it up, changes it to IAA, which is indoleacetic acid. It's a growth hormone, natural one, the plant does. It's pumped to the growing tips for new growth, or to the growing roots to start new root growth. Calcium activates the enzymes that actually pump the growth hormones to the growing tips. So if there's a calcium deficiency, they can't make more bricks. So they say, don't try to make bricks, we don't have the calcium. But if there's plenty of it available, they say, that enzyme says, okay, let's keep growing, let's multiply, let's make more. And on that romaine lettuce, it was so beautiful. On the very, very edge of the leaf, just 1 cell thick, it was like a ribbon of gold around the outside, where the cell had built up, was already building, but it hadn't filled up with chlorophyll yet. And that was the sign to the produce buyers. They just looked at it, and they knew that it was top quality. Anyway, so it does, that's lettuce, but it does work on other plants as well. If you want your quality. So if you use CalMag or hard water, this is the first thing you should buy. If you're using RO water, then of course your humic and folic would probably be your very first thing to add. But this will help too, because if you have calcium that's locked up, you want to unlock it so the plant can use it. Okay, I think I'm almost out of time now. And I think I'm almost done too. Yeah, I guess I am. I'm down to 1. We talked about the yucca. Cane molasses. Any of you guys use cane molasses?
That's what I always do. Love it.
Cane molasses. This is high in iron. That's part of the color there. It's a good source of iron. This will, everyone that uses it, they think that, well, if I use cane molasses, it sweetens my plant. It really actually it doesn't. Because, well, actually it does. But I'm really confusing the camera here. It does, but not because the molasses goes into the plant. It won't. It feeds the microorganisms on the roots. Toward the end of growth, when plants are finishing up, during heavy flowering, the last part of flowering, they get real stingy. They don't want to leak sugars to feed the microbes. They want to store the sugars in the flowers, the seeds, the fruit, so they don't leak as much. So when they're not leaking carbohydrates, the microbes run out of food on the roots, so they go to sleep. Now in nature, that's a good plant, because what happens is the microbes go to sleep, but then the next year, the seed falls, or the fruits fall, with the stored sugars, they germinate, they're re-inoculated, and they start a new series, a new year, cycle of life. But in our gardens, we're not having next year. We're going to chop it, we're done, we're harvesting. So there, where we can help, we can actually help nature. because we can feed the microbes when the plants stop feeding them. And one of the things that they'll do too, when they use this, that iron, microorganisms like Bacillus subtilis, they literally make a molecule called a siderophore. And that literally means iron carrier. They make one of the best chelators for iron in nature, right there on the roots. So as they're growing and multiplying, they're making the iron more available for their metabolism and for the plant. And so it helps with the iron uptake, which keeps that photosynthesis going. Now here's something new that I've learned. Actually, I wrote an article on cane molasses this summer, but I've learned new things since then. Some of those microorganisms in the soil that you're feeding with cane molasses during flowering, they make a bouquet of aromas. They're called volatile organic compounds that even if they don't touch the plant can sense those aromas from the microbes, and it'll trigger up to 600 different genes in the plant. And one of the genes it triggers is the iron homeostasis that actually stimulates the plant to take up more iron, keep photosynthesis going. And when the plant takes up more iron, they use it as a catalyst to make chlorophyll. The plant continues to do metabolism, it continues to do photosynthesis. The other thing it does, one of those other aromas, down-regulates what's called the sugar signaling in the plant. And the plant has, okay, I've stored up all the sugar I need for the rest of my life, I'm done, right? So it stops doing photosynthesis. It doesn't need to store more, it has all it needs. Well, if it gets that aroma from the microbe, it turns off that signal. So the plant will, because the microbe says, no, feed me, feed me. It wants to keep living. So the plant will continue to do photosynthesis, continue to accumulate sugars, more than it needs. A portion of that is leaked to the microbes. The rest of it is stored. So you can literally keep the sugars and photosynthesis going all the way through the day of harvest if you have a healthy, vigorous, enthusiastic microbial community. And by giving it the sugars, you're actually stimulating that to happen. So more, and the plant scientists that have done studies on cane molasses, they're going to attribute most of the positive effects to the iron and the availability more than the sugar itself. But again, it's a combination of things. So yes, during fruiting and flowering, especially toward the end, or even if you're doing a flush back there, adding a little sugar with it's a good thing, because that's, you're going to be flushing away the minerals. You want to give the, you want to be able to feed those microbes all the way to the end, all the way to the last day. Let's see, anything else with this one? I'll give you one caution. If you're doing hydroponics, I would recommend that you don't use cane molasses, especially during vegetative growth. I'll tell you, I literally did a whole series of lab experiments. I tested all the sweet products out there and did tests with leaf analysis, the whole 9 yards. And well, what happens is, remember, hydroponic nutrient, 90% of the nitrogen is nitrates, and only 10% is the ammonia. Kind of the opposite of in nature. Okay, so if during veg you give the plant some add some carbohydrates, you're going to feed microorganisms that are in your reservoir, that are out there, but you give a competitive advantage to the microbes that eat the nitrates and change them to nitrites. The nitrites are toxic to plants. So I did tests with all the sweet products. I'd mix up a whole fresh batch of nutrients. I'd add the sweet product as recommended, take the nutrient sample right then, send it to the lab for analysis. Some of those samples 3 days later, I got the analysis back, 0 nitrates. I had full strength, I might have done 300 parts per million nitrates. 3 days later, 0. I said, no, they made a mistake in the lab. I made them retest. I sent this to the UK, the samples. I said, that can't be. I know I put nitrates in there. There were no plants yet. They couldn't have taken them out. They have to be there. No, the microbes in that short a time changed all the nitrates into nitrites. So I ended up going to another lab and started doing nitrite tests. That's what was there. So every single test I did, we're done. With the sugars, it was worse than the control without it. Yeah, so I discontinued the experiment. I was actually going to make a sweet product based on not molasses, but on maple syrup. We canceled the whole thing, so this is not going to work. It's worse in hydro. But during flowering, I didn't get to do that test because they discontinued it. It might have helped. It might have helped at the end, especially the last couple of weeks. I don't know because you don't really need that much nitrates anymore. In fact, you get a nitrogen deficiency then, who cares? Your flowers and your fruit will taste even better. So, it can be used in hydro, but I definitely know for a fact not to use it during vegetative growth. Okay, that's all. We're done. It's all questions now. We need some food, whatever. Any questions at all on anything we talked about today? Yes.
Yeah, I got a question. I've heard rumors about adding the silica right after your calcium, magnesium, and it kind of combining with the calcium and actually locking it out or making it not available for the plant. Is that true?
If you're using potassium silicate, like the other silica products, there can be some chemical reactions and some oxidation, and it can lock up some nutrients. The commercial growers that use, I do work with the biggest cucumber grower in North America, over in Canada, in Leamington. They have 70 acres under glass, all hydroponics. Yeah. And the first, it's a lot of cucumbers. We were riding around in golf carts to go see everything. But I came as a consultant with them. The first thing they do is they add silica. But then when the raw water comes in, they add the silica first. And then they add their nutrients and they do their pH adjustment. And it has a positive effect on the plant. So even from what I know about the commercial guys, if you want to err on the side of caution, add your silica first and then add your stuff afterwards.
I can back that up as far as the same thing or whatever. So I use Botanic Care Silica Blast. If you do it backwards or whatever, you'll end up with that cloudy effect. If you put it in there first and add everything later, you don't have that problem.
You won't have this, yeah.
No.
That will help keep it down. And the biogenic silica, that you can add that anytime and it won't lock anything up at all because it's very neutral with the pH. That's a good question. First time I've heard that one. I heard someone recently say that you don't want to use, if you overdo it with silica, it's going to affect the quality. It's going to have a negative effect on quality at the end. But I have a hard time backing that one up scientifically because the plants don't accumulate very much silica anyway. Garden vegetables, they don't accumulate it at all. In fact, they try to reject it, the silica. Rice accumulates it, grains, grasses, and some dicots like sunflowers and hemp they're silica neutral, so they do accumulate. So it helps strengthen the plant. But most other garden vegetables, it's just a minor improvement, maybe with the resistance to disease. That's really it. I think it's beneficial to all plants, but it's not going to, it's not going to accumulate to toxic levels, no matter how much you use. Any other questions? I hope I was able to give something for everyone. You can get food for thought. If you understand it, you can make small changes. And I recommend, here's the biggest mistake I've had so far. I've gone out and done classes. A gardener says, you know what, I'm going to try what you were saying with the humic and I'll use the fulvic acid and the seaweed, and maybe the aminos. And then they come back, I do a follow-up class, and they say, Harley, it really worked. This is the best harvest I have ever had. So you know what they want to do? They want to add everything now. Now they want to use all the products all at once. Because, well, that worked out really well. Well, yeah, but you... And I'm not a salesman. If I was a salesman, I'd say, good idea, replace all your nutrients and use just this. But no, the idea is you find a way to get the most for your money, to get the best results with the fewest changes. As a grower, I wouldn't even change one element more than 50% at one time, ever. I just don't want to stress the plant. I'll make minor, even when I'm adjusting pH. If it shot up too much, I'm not going to take, if it's 6.8, I'm not going to take it to 6.0. I'll take it down to 6.4. and the next day 6.2, and the next day to 6.0. I think that helps the plant. Smaller changes are easier for the plant to adjust to. And once they make that adjustment, they'll thank you. They'll come back and will reward you with a better yield or better flavors, better colors. But don't do too much. Too much of a good thing is not a good thing. And only change 1 or 2 things at a time at the most. And if it makes a difference, keep using it. If you really don't see a difference, why waste your money? But luckily here, you're going to be wasting the whole $9 if potassium doesn't work. It's going to work. You know, that's the other part. This is really clean, simple technology. It's not. I don't have 10 different things in this proprietary blend. This is just potassium. It's going to work, but just like I said, just do small changes. Do things the way you're doing them now. Only just make small improvements. Quality your yield.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.